Human trafficking, luxury real estate, and building a family business, getting to work with luxury clients, all things we're going to talk about today. I've got Shae Invidiata with me, and we're going to be talking in depth about how she helped grow this luxury team that is known worldwide, working with luxury clients, how she actually got into fighting against human trafficking, and a little bit of her journey. I was on her podcast, which is a great show that you definitely want to check out. Shae, welcome to the Prime People podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So when I was on your podcast, I mean, it was very similar to the setup for this one. Fireside chat, two people that are in the industry. I know we know of each other because we're working with a similar caliber of clientele. I've always been curious about how you guys have been doing what you're doing. Didn't realize there was a family component to it and that you were so integral in that. So I'm going to pick your brain about the real estate component. But the human trafficking thing I thought was super interesting. So why don't you get into a little bit of the philanthropy first? I want to hear about that.
Yeah, sure. So, my journey actually in fighting human trafficking started in 2003. So literally this has been a 20-year, I really call it my life work. I'm 38 now. So, it was a long time. I was 18. I moved to Hawaii to start my university education. And the joke is, what'd you major in? No, I didn't major in surfing or the beach. Although there's components of that, but I went for marketing, advertising, and oftentimes, like I've grown up like listening to my dad say, we're really in an event marketing industry.
For
just
sure.
happen to sell homes,
Yep.
And so that's what I took in university. And while I was there, have you ever been to Hawaii?
When I was little, I barely remember it. So we were on Maui, Honolulu, I think. But yeah, haven't been in a long time.
Okay, so you definitely need to go back. And for those of you guys tuning in today who maybe have been to Honolulu, Waikiki, you'll know that there's three main roads that parallel the ocean. The middle one is known as Kohio Avenue. And if you stay there long enough, even as a tourist, you might learn it to be known as Candy Lane.
Okay.
And it was on this avenue that there was a hotel, half operated as the university dorm, the other half operated as a hotel. And I would see so many things happening there when it went from daytime, board shorts, surfboards, to evening, and seeing girls kind of still in bathing suits, but with high heels on and red lipstick, and walking what I would learn to know as the track. And I was 18 at the time, seeing so many girls that were visibly younger than me, 14, 15, 16 years old. And we all know that a girl can put on mom's high heels, red lipstick,
Sure.
and a 14-year-old can very easily look like an 18, 19-year-old. And this was my home. So this is where I was living. This is my dorm. And I would wake up at 6 a.m. to maybe go for a beach walk or go surf before going to class. I would sometimes see these girls. I'd come home from night classes. I'd see them. I'd come home from the club, come home from dinners at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. in the morning, and I would still see these girls. And so I had a choice to either acknowledge their presence because they are like my neighbors that I see day in and day out, or ignore them. And the third was try to understand why. Regardless of what my position was or my belief system was around prostitution being right or wrong, I really wanted to understand, why would a girl choose to do this? And I'm a firm believer that if you are asking the question, you need to be willing to receive the response in not a debate manner, right? Like sometimes people ask a question, but they're not really asking you a question because they're already preparing for their second response. And that's not having a dialogue. So that's kind of what I set out to do when I was 18 years old. God bless my parents as well. Like I came home at Christmas and I said to my parents everything that I was seeing. And I just said, I think these girls are being forced to do this. I don't think that this is something they're choosing to do. And my mom was like, we sent you to Hawaii. We thought things were going to be fine and safe. And my dad, as a father to a daughter, is going like, danger, like that's not a good thing to kind of get wrapped up in. And I said, don't worry, I'm protected. If this is something I'm being called to do, then it's not my decision anyways. I grew up in a very strong faith home.
Yeah.
And I say faith because religion for me is very controlling and lack of choice. And I had all the choice. I had all the freedom, and understanding that, it was a relationship based that I had with God, with Jesus, who's my homeboy. We talked about that on my podcast as well. And so when I went back, it's a much longer story that, unless we're taking up all the time today to talk about it, we'll have to unpack this maybe another time. But over 2.5 years, I started to interact with these girls in a safe, non-threatening way, because they're always being watched.
Yeah.
To start a relationship with them, and starting to, little by little, understanding how they got there, why they're still there. And what I learned, Justin, is that the word prostitute that we equate so much with choice is widely misrepresented, and that the more accurate word to be using is prostituted. I learned about the modeling agency gig that was promised to them on the mainland, whether they were coming from Canada or the United States, ending up in Hawaii, and there was no modeling gig. There was no, job opportunity. To the boyfriends that promised them a vacation, dream vacation, and it turned into their literal worst nightmares, to forced abortions, forced augmentation procedures. And I didn't know back then that there was this massive word called human trafficking, but I was describing it.
Sure.
I was like, these girls are being lured, they're being coerced, they're being exploited,
manipulated, right? Like it's
all of the things, and now you're in this compromised position, and there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of control, there's a lot of brainwashing, manipulating, as you said. And so I remember one day sitting at sunset on the beach, and sometimes we look at issues and we look at problems and we say, that's not a me problem, somebody else will take care of it. And that could have been a scenario for me. But I was looking around in Waikiki, along with the Christian groups down there, handing out what we call tracts, which are just sheets of paper that usually have some Bible verse on it that is explaining who Jesus is, how you can get saved, and coming to know Christ. And literally seeing these girls beside these church groups, I was like, there's something really, really wrong here, where nobody's going for these girls. And if I don't, who will? Because how many people before me also said the same thing? I'm sure somebody's helping them. I'm sure somebody's going for them. So I just made a vow back then, little 20-year-old me, 19-year-old me, saying, I don't know what, I don't know how, but as long as I have a voice. I really hate the phrase, a voice for the voiceless. It's a really kitschy charity term that we throw around.
Sure.
I believe we all have a voice, and I believe they had been silenced. And so I vowed to amplify their voices, to amplify their stories, as long as people would listen. And, that was 2003 to 2006. I moved to Australia Vancouver, then Australia, back to Canada, looking at what was going on here in our country, and really seeing there was this massive gap between, not a lot, but between nonprofits and different organizations that were rescuing victims of trafficking. But nobody was doing the awareness, and nobody was doing the education component. And I'm a firm believer that how can you fight something you're not aware exists? And more so, if you don't know it exists and then you don't understand the problem, you're probably not going to give any money to it, right? Like so far, even in our conversation right now, if I said to you, hey, listen, give me $100 to fight human trafficking, you'd be like, for the story that you've heard so far, sure, no problem. Like, pat on the back, good for you, you did something. But if I said to you, I want 10 grand, I want $1,000, I want $100,000, you would be saying, whoa, Shae, like, slow down. What's the problem in Canada? Who's this happening to? Why is it happening? How are the funds being used? And so that's really what my mission became, was the awareness education component. And I wanted to bridge that gap between those that were doing great work, but nobody knew that they existed, and changing our legislation, going into media and course correcting language like we're seeing right now around words like child pornography. Those are two words that never should go together. Because again, there's this notion around porn that it is choice-based industry, and a child cannot choose that. Even though we are in a moment in time in history where we're going down this path where they're going to try to say that children can consent to having sexual relations with an adult. That is a whole conversation for another day, but that is where this is going, and child and pornography should never go together. So it's child rape images, child exploitive images. And so back in 2010, that's what I did. I founded Freedom to raise awareness. The byproduct of that is we do raise funds, and we work with a lot of great frontline organizations that are experts in rehabilitating and rescuing. And we focus on all things to do with preventative measures to fight human trafficking, community groups, speaking engagements, fundraisers, legislation, on the preventative side.
And how have you integrated that with your work? Like one thing we do on this channel is we really try and help people find purpose in what they do. The reason I led with the philanthropy work you're doing is, I mean, most people would look at you optically on, say, Instagram or what the team's done in the real estate world. They'd be like, I want to know how we're going to sell luxury houses, which we will talk about. Like, you run sales for a top team, and that's a big component of the conversation. But I would say, like, the people I respect don't separate the two things. They bring in their passions into their work, probably so much so that it drives their work to another level. Like, what is the integration between, say, philanthropy and what you do on the real estate side?
Yeah, there's two avenues that I see happen often amongst not just realtors, but business in general, where years ago you could see there was this trend that if you align yourself with a cause or you align yourself with a charity, you're going to drive more business in your business. Mm-hmm. And that is true, because people want to feel that their consumer decision to purchase something is actually creating positive and effective change. We all want to do that. Like, if I'm going to buy a bottle of water that is doing nothing versus the bottles of water at Starbucks that they say goes to help, provide clean water in Africa and build wells, you're going to buy that bottle of water because you're going to spend that money anyways. The difference for me in the longevity is there's a lot of businesses out there that you can feel that it's not as genuine. It's really a business move. And, you kind of do one thing one time and people are like, oh, okay, that's great. But then, like, where's the longevity? Where is the history? Where is, your track record for what you're supporting and how you're supporting it? And how
I think people can smell it too, right? Like, I can see when somebody's doing something for the photo op or the image of,
right.
I'm going to help this cause because it's trending in the news right now, and let's jump on that wagon, versus, I mean, how passionate you were about what you were speaking about. That's what I want people to see. And like, it's okay that you're tackling that and that somebody else is tackling something different. I think the way it's presented, and again, a biblical principle that we live by, is a lot of times we don't talk at all about what we do. And there's other things that we do talk about, because by talking about it, we draw in support in those things. But I think it's organic, right? And you can really feel and smell it on people.
You can. And that is why I always say to people, even, with something like the magnitude of what I've built from the charity side, you don't need to go and start an organization. You don't need to be going and changing legislation. You don't need to be doing these things. What you need to do is find something that actually tugs on your heartstring and focus on that and integrating that in your daily life, because that's your passion that you can turn into profit. And that's a real thing, and I don't think people should be ashamed of that either. But when you're doing it from the heart, as you said, you can tell. Like, I can see when certain agents are aligning themselves with a cause, and it is for the photo op, and it is to try to just get another phone call or, that CMA presentation in. And I mean, we've done so many things over the years. Like, I grew up in a home where giving back was just what we do. Like, we're blessed to be a blessing, and with that comes great responsibility. And I mean, I watched both my parents over the years. We've supported so many different things. But it always kind of was within these kind of core things that my dad and my mom really loved. A lot of it was very children focused. And maybe that's kind of like was
For
my
sure.
integration. Like
The
I worked in,
fingerprints of your parents, right?
yes,
Yeah.
and so I think there's different ways over the years where you can be educating. Like, for example, I went out to Myth last night to the Greek restaurant in Toronto.
Okay.
And, we open up the menu and it's saying for every Saganaki that is ordered, they are helping stop the Greek fires. Amazing. Like, we were going to order Saganaki anyways, because like it's amazing. But now, like, we wanted to order too. Because it was like, okay, cool. Like, it's going towards the fires. And so you can do things that are small like that, where, you're not even telling people that you're aligning yourself with a cause until you're actually sitting in their kitchen table or on a Zoom giving a presentation. Like, that more subtle is a lot more genuine, because you're not using it to try to get the phone to ring or to get, presentation requests, like for an evaluation on a home. There's a time and a place where you can do that. I mean, around my campaign, like, we would do the Freedom Walk. We did 9 of them where we were in Toronto. We did one simultaneously in Ottawa one year where we had thousands of people, MPs, like ministers come out, all kinds. And there's a period for like 3 months where we are marketing and encouraging the public to get involved, to join, that we actually go around saying, if you do call for an evaluation, like X amount, $500 or whatever it is, not if you sign with us. It's not even if you were to sign with us, just to have the opportunity to meet with you, and then also sharing, this is what's going on in our own backyards, right here in Oakville, right in London, where you are, like it's happening right here. And so there's unique ways that you can integrate it where people feel really good about making that decision. They're like, I just am listing with you, even if I don't list with you, because that wasn't part of the deal. I'm like now helping fighting human trafficking in my own backyard locally here. And, that creates impact. I've gotten people who have called me. There's a lot of people in Toronto that actually only know me as Freedom. We have a very strong brand around freedom and fighting human trafficking, that every now and then I get somebody going, oh, you're Invidiata in real estate? Like, that's you too? I'm like, yep. I'm like, Freedom's volunteer for me, so I don't make money from that. But that's what you become known for in many ways, like what your heart is passionate about. And I've gotten so many different calls over the years of people being like, I've come to your events, and we knew that when the time came to list, you're the only person that we wanted to call, because we aligned with your mission and your work. And that's just the longevity and the consistency, which I really only believe like your passion can take you through. Otherwise, it just becomes work at some point.
Absolutely. It's funny. So I'll actually share my screen really quick for those of you that are in the audio podcast. You got to go over to YouTube if you want to see this. But I'm going to share 2 websites that I pulled up. One is actually the Invidiata is your dad, and how slick it is, and it emphasizes the luxury brand and that experience matters, global reach, very important, right? Like, people want to hire people that are connected. And then Free Them is the other page I pulled up, right? And look at that, the Freedom Walk and the amount of people that were there. And when I look at these 2 sites, the reason I brought them up was, a lot of people may be watching this podcast saying, Justin, like, why are you spending time talking about human trafficking and spending time with Shae and digging in? I'm like, well, it's going to stack in so many ways, because my audience has never met you before. Some of them haven't, and now they'll go follow you. And maybe there's people that's a passion for them. They're going to link up with you. My actual real estate clients, we both know, have properties that people from the GTA and Toronto are coming down to London to buy. And guess what? Because we develop a relationship, you follow my stuff. So if I'm at a commercial property doing a live or posting a listing, I'm getting more exposure for my clients. So the way I strategically have always thought about it was, why would I separate who I am and the passions that I'm involved with and the community that I'm building from my work, when in reality, we live in a world where you can stack everything. I'm more paying attention to your stuff because of the fact that I'm in the luxury market and I maybe have buyers that are in your area. So like, there's a massive benefit from an actual business standpoint to building bridges and relationships. But more than that, I think we're going back to a time where people care about community building, right? And I think we got away from that with the corporations and the governance and the over-regulations of all the free markets and, hoping that somebody else is going to come in and take care of it. Nobody's going to take care of it. Like, we have to build these bridges in these communities ourselves. And going into the real estate side of things, strategically, like, you're not going to be for everybody, but you're going to be for a very specific type of client. So give me an idea of what your background in real estate looked like, how the Invidiata team formed itself, your involvement in that, and what that looks like today.
Yeah. So, my dad, my father has been in real estate for 38 years. Basically got into the industry when I was just about a year, and I was like pulling myself up. He was in the jewelry business. He was out in Edmonton, and my mom called and said, "You won't believe it, your daughter's pulling herself up for the first time." My dad looked at his like fashion business partner who was like smoking a cigarette. They were in this hotel room, and he's like, "What am I doing here with this dude when like my daughter, firstborn, is pulling herself up for the first time? Like, I'm doing the wrong thing." So he got into real estate because it was localized and kept him here, but it was actually his father, who was a medical doctor, said to him, you're really great with people. You love luxury things. My dad, was in the jewelry business and then also doing like Italian fine leather goods, and said to him, what if you just pick something more expensive to specialize in, like homes? And people need homes more than they do jewelry. And my dad was also felt the effect of the 80s when interest rates were more than 10% higher than where they are now, and they skyrocketed, and gold went through the roof, and that shut down my dad's business as well. So it was like, okay, now looking for this shift, he found himself in real estate and really wanting to specialize in luxury because that's what he loved. But from inception, and even his decision to choose me, even though I'm his daughter, but there's still this human element and around people focus centered. And my dad gets asked often, like around secrets of success in real estate and building. And 9 times out of 10, he will tell people that the secret is loving people. And it's funny. I laugh at that. I'm like, gosh, I think of how many people come in, they're like, that's it. Like, that is the gold nugget that we're supposed to take away. And there's a huge component to that where it's yes, like, we are not in the sales industry, and as much as I think a lot of realtors throw around saying we're in the relationship business, and it's all about building relationships. So many agents really still don't understand what that actually means. They hear other agents saying it, but they're still very much in a sales-based role versus embodying service, embodying like we are in the people business. And so from the beginning, that's really how my dad separated himself, was really connecting with the relationships around people, investing in them, investing in their families. And so that was really what was a catalyst to growing the business and then becoming the market expert in knowledge. Because we first decide if we like somebody and we want to work with them, yes or no. And then after you've established, do I like Justin? Do I like Shae? Do I like Christopher? Then it's like, are they qualified to actually handle my business, handle my asset? And even if they like you, if you're not qualified, it's like, oh, God, Shae, I really, really like you, but there's that but. And so those two things from my dad was, he wanted to become the expert, and he started with waterfront and logged every single thing, and then did all of the research and the history and data intake. And it's still today a log that we have and we use. And we're known for luxury waterfront properties, pretty much like we call it the Gold Coast. But here, like Mississauga, Oakville, Burlington, and then going still more east and west. So that was like, it's always, that's always just been embedded and embodied in like what we do. And obviously there's many other things around that we've added on and layered, but it really starts there of being the expert in your data, in the knowledge, but you cannot miss the people, the focus for first of the heart of a human. And so many agents are just, they see a dollar sign, right? Yeah. Like they see what they can make. I could tell you endless stories that have come from rentals, and it's not necessarily the most glorifying work. We work the hardest for little money on a rental. And some of those have translated into the most highest sales. Like I could tell you one that's real story in Oakville. I think it was about for $4,000 for a rental. And one of our agents, she was assigned to it because she was one that more handled rentals. And it's a longer story, but he was an owner of one of the hockey teams in Canada. She didn't know it. She's a single mom, okay, who was a former nurse, did not know it. And he said his name, they meet, and she's like, okay,
Sure.
well, I'll go show you. He wanted country properties first. And so they were up, like about 40, 50 minutes outside of our core area, but we do handle rural properties. So she's up there. After 3 weeks of showing rentals for $4,000, he called and said, we've decided we want to buy instead. And cool. Okay. Well, what's the budget? Up to 25 million. Literally was like, oh my God. And at that point in her career, even on our team, at that point in her career, she had never sold anything above 2 million. Yeah. So it was like, holy shit. And the requirement, because of course she called my father, I call him CGI. So she calls CGI. Those are his initials. I can't.
What's his middle name?
Gerard.
There you go.
Christopher Gerard Invidiata. Yeah. So this is what we call him in the office. And now that I'm, in the field, it's coined among some of our clients too. So she calls CGI and she's like, you'll never believe it. Like it went from 4,000 to 25 million. And so my dad, calls, gets involved, and the requirement for him purchasing was that she would remain on the file and be the one a part of that process. They ended up purchasing in Oakville on the Lake for about 21 million. And this is like, you never know. And so if you are not serving and leading with love, like true love, not like, yeah, you could go service a rental, but like, do you actually care about the people that you're serving? Can they actually feel that genuine connection? She would not have captured that. She would have lost that client, been annoyed. I probably would have been annoyed. 3 weeks for $4,000 showing you country properties, an hour outside,
Sure.
And it was her heart. And again, like the agents that we have on the team, we go through a lot of that with them. Some of that you cannot teach, that some of that's already just, you are that or you're not that. But it translated into a $21 million deal. And we've got a lot of those stories.
Yeah. I mean, I could echo the biggest commission check I ever got was from a story like that. It was actually a small commercial tenant nobody wanted to touch. And they were 1,200 square feet. Then they were 3,000. Then they were 8,000. Then they were 30,000, 10-year deal. The metrics of that are fantastic, but everybody chases the unicorns and they don't take care of the ponies, and ponies never turn into unicorns, and they wonder why. There's two things I'm going to draw out of that conversation, though. Like two very basic principles for anybody watching this that's an entrepreneur and in business. Talk about investing in people, so your human capital, and then market intelligence. And I would actually argue those are the only two things that anybody should be focused on a daily basis. Is, we're in the relationship business, like you said earlier, but like as a venture capitalist, where are you deploying your time, your skill, your resources into building those relationships? So it's more than just a relationship business. And then market intelligence. We know waterfront better than anybody else. Like basic metrics and choosing to just get to a black belt level at stuff that is boring to everybody else. So let's talk about market intelligence first, and then we're going to go back to the people. Market intelligence. If I said, Shae, you're coming to Grand Bend, Ontario, which is a market that we cover with beautiful waterfront properties here, like what are the actual metrics that you're looking at in order to become that market expert?
Well, my first, when you're looking at waterfront, my first question to you would be, is riparian versus non-riparian rights, right? Do I own the waterfront or do I own up to the waterfront? Most important.
Why does that matter for everybody watching?
Well, I mean, that becomes then, an increased value when you can own basically what is into the water. You basically own a water lot. Then depending on what the town allows, you could put a dock in there. You can have your boat there. So if I'm looking on the waterfront, that makes a really big difference. And also the size of it, because some of them are only like 25 feet riparian rights into the water. There's others where it's a full acre, so like that water right enhances the value of your property considerably. And so if I'm going into a new territory, like I would want to know that. And there's many properties that as zonings get changed, they can lose their riparian rights and they're non-renewable. So that then becomes even more valuable. So I would want to know, is that happening in your market? Is that something that you're seeing amongst the conservation committees?
Oh yeah.
The old guys, which means like it's such a headache to get anything done and changed or approved sometimes, so these are the type of questions I would want to know, like, what's it like in your market?
Well, it's funny. I did a recent appraisal where riparian rights, I sold a property for 2.85 and there was another property that I was appraising and they didn't have the riparian rights. And I'm like, that's a couple $100,000. Like the fact that people could come in, the buyers are going to perceive that, from a marketing perspective, I could make an argument if I was selling the property that perceived, say, $100,000 difference should only be maybe 50 because the actual functionality and distance for anybody to get to your property is not realistic. But as why they hire me is I'm able to extrapolate that and interpret the data. And again, the amount of handshake deals that were done between neighbors that were not documented and stuff that's on title, not to mention the conservation authorities. That's why people hire me is you can't hire three of the exact same type of hire three agents is expect to get the same result depending on the skill level of the agents. Like hiring 3 race car drivers, there's Lewis Hamilton and then there's the guy who's in last place, right?
Totally. Yeah. Yes. I don't know any of those race cars drivers.
No, that's okay.
I'm gonna take your word for it.
Whatever, hockey, basketball, it all the talent that you hire really does have a big impact. In terms of the relationship piece, so you talked about how investing in people, that was a big part of your dad building his business. And I truly do believe that. Like I look at what I do as venture capital. You sign with me. I'm investing thousands of dollars into your relationship, not to mention my time, which is my most valuable asset. How or what components of investing into his clients do you think made your dad successful?
Investing into his clients?
Yeah, you use the terminology of my dad really invested in people. Like what did he invest and what did that investment look like?
Yeah. So in a different, matrix, I talk about the money producing activities that agents should be focused on. There's 5 different things. The last one, because I'm going to answer your question, the last one is building the relationship with the client, which most agents, once a deal is closed, they move on. Yeah. And there's very little follow-up. There's very little engagement beyond that. So as a client, even if you had a pleasant experience during that, from the first phone call to closing, when after the fact, you might only hear from your agent on an anniversary or a birthday, which 5 years ago, you could get away with getting that email being like, happy birthday, so-and-so. And it's personalized to them. And it, to the client receiving, it's like, oh, Shae remembered my birthday. Now we're like, okay, yeah, I'm in your CRM. I'm getting this automation. Like you actually don't know when my birthday is. It's just fed out. Right.
Yeah.
So there's so much though in between all of that should be taking place. And from going out to lunches and dinners, inviting clients over to your home. And I'm not saying this is what other agents need to be doing or even necessarily that would work today, but this is part of my father's journey. I mean, I grew up watching my parents entertaining and hosting with multiple clients. It would be like a feast on the weekends or midweek where we would have 6 couples, or 3 couples around the dining table at our own home. And, you don't just invite anybody into your home. So the fact that as a client, they were being invited into their agent's home to break bread, spend time, drink good wine, all of the things, there's a value exchange for them where they feel valued, they feel special. And that's where you build these relationships. And then it just grows from there. I mean, we've gone on trips with so many of our clients where their kids are my age. And then we just like grew up together. We've gone skiing in Banff together. We've gone down to Dominican together. And from that, it just, all of a sudden your clients just actually become your friends. And that's the relationship building where you turn clients into friends. You turn clients into, basically for life. And also you get that generational, because then when I grew up, And at some point I decided to get my license. Now the parents' kids that are my age, I'm able to service them. And the parents love that generational transfer. They think it's so cool that they've been clients of my dad for 10, 15, 20 years. They've seen me grow up with their kids. And now I'm able to go and service their kids on their first homes, their second homes. And so when you really decide, you're not there for that one-time transaction, but you're actually investing in your client's growth and in your client's success, right? Because what is $200,000 today could be 2 million, 20 million down the line. And we've always wanted to grow with our clients and celebrate our clients. New job milestones, going out and celebrating with them. Really, it's this integration where the lines get super blurred between what is a client and like what is a friend. And that's also how you organically are growing your business, because you can't help but have your clients speak about you because you've created an experience that has gone beyond what their expectation has been. And for agents in the luxury market, I hear this all the time. Like agents being like, well, wanting to charge full commission at 5%. I'm like, well, tell me why do you earn your 5%? Like what value are you bringing? And in this space, if you are in luxury real estate, there's a high expectation of what service is for 5%.
Yeah.
Even if your market, some markets, luxury could be a full 3%, but whatever luxury is in your market, we don't get a pat on the back for a job that we are expected to deliver on. Right? It's when you excel that and when you go beyond that and you create an experience that the client wasn't expecting, that's when they start talking about you. But to think that like you just did your job well, you serviced well, and that can be the things, that could be the flowers, the cards, because you're at a different level. You're offering a different, what we call the Invidiata Advantage white glove service. So when you're doing that, it's like, okay, this was great, experience. But you still have to go above and beyond that if you're wanting people to talk about you. And that's really for us, like when the magic happens. And so when you're investing in people and in that relationship, taking interest to like what they like, for example, I'll give you one. We had a closing come up for a client of ours. One of our clients has multiple kids. I think there was like 4 or 5 kids in the family. And there was this one little guy, every time like my dad saw them around, he loves popcorn, he likes movies. And my dad just took note to this. Like this kid like has this fixation on popcorn. So for a closing gift, can't remember what the price point was. It was probably around 10 million, something like that. You could get your own typical closing gift. Sure. And the client would say, thank you. Housewarming gift. Wonderful. My dad sent to the house one of those like Carnival full-size popcorn machines with the red wheels.
Yeah. That's funny.
And like had the stuffed animal on it. Popcorn was in there and like had it delivered to the house. Let me tell you how that just penetrated the whole market, like in that neighborhood, because this was so beyond unexpected. And for the client was so thoughtful of taking something that was so simple, like popcorn movies, and he turned it into a beautiful experience for those clients. So it's small things like that would be really easy to just do what's expected of us. But it's when you go beyond that and you create something worth speaking about and that emotion, right? I mean, I'm sure you've said this before. People often don't remember what you say, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And that's something that we strive in all of our engagements with clients, is to be delivering that feeling that has gone above and beyond what they did not pay for, what they did not expect of us.
Yeah, I think it's key. That's the investment right there, right? Whether it's actual money, whether it's your time, or just the retention and the ability to remember and actually pay attention to the human beings that you're dealing with on a daily basis. I think it gets missed a lot in our industry. And people, again, as much as the consumers may try to commodify real estate agents and think that they're all created equal, The agents have a tendency to do that to the actual public out there as well. And if you're in the luxury market, it is more important than ever to empathize and pay attention and remember. I love that piece that you talked about in terms of bringing people into your ecosystem. We do something called the Prime Invitational, typically twice a year, where we invite clients, we invite people like yourself or anybody that's a referral partner, and we actually bring them to a restaurant or we'll host it at an event. And what's cool about it is the reason we do it is twofold. One, we just do a little session, mastermind, market intelligence, what's happening, that piece we talked about earlier. Yeah. The second, and probably the better part of it, is I put people in a room together, and maybe you meet somebody who's somewhere else that can refer you business, or all of a sudden you're doing a development deal with somebody else that you would have never met had it not been for the event I'm hosting. The proximity of like-minded people tends to bring forth success outside of necessarily a transaction I'm involved in. Sure. But guess what you're going to remember with that other person that you met the relationship with, that maybe you do business with, that you met at my event. And then all of a sudden that all kind of reciprocates, right? So I think you've given so many good lessons in this episode. I know we could talk for hours and hours and hours. I'll probably have you back on to talk about event marketing and strategy. Yeah, you know, I want to direct everybody over to your content. So how do they come find you, and how can they learn more about you?
Yeah, thank you for that. So Shae Invidiata across all socials. So just my first name and last name. And then if you want to tune in to the podcast, it's the Freedom CEO podcast, that we can connect, and my DMs are always open. So you can connect with me on the inside.
Everybody go do that. If you got any value from this episode, go give her a DM and connect with her. That's what the Prime People podcast is. It's an opportunity for you to meet amazing people like Shae in my network, but you have to do the effort. You got to go connect with them, and maybe you'll find passion, purpose, and drive just like she's found in her business. Thank you so much for coming on the Prime People podcast, Shae, and I'm sure we'll do this again sometime.
Thanks for having me.
All right. I'll catch you next time. Take care.